And good morning and welcome. It's time for another interview segment with my friend Karen Onan, and she is from the East Central Regional Transportation Coordinating Council, which is underneath the heading of the East Central Regional Development Commission. There we go.
Got it.
So it's a lot of stuff to remember and a lot of acronyms, and we try to make it simple here, but it's important that you understand that what we're talking about today is transportation, and transportation in our 5-county area, and hopefully reaching out into not only Minnesota, but surrounding states ultimately, because today, Karen, why don't you introduce Nick to us?
Well, yeah. Thank you, Robin. I'm glad to be here again. Today, we have with us Nick Zelle. He is with Jefferson Lines. Thanks, Nick, for being here. It's a pleasure to meet you in person finally. How long have you been with Jefferson Lines?
Well, personally, kind of since September. Yeah, I moved home during COVID, and Jefferson Lines is actually a family business. I kind of grew up, really aware of all of the activity that Jefferson was doing.
Was your great-grandfather or one of the...
Exactly. My great-grandfather founded the company in 1919. And so it's been really great to kind of join into that story.
To carry on your family tradition, I bet your family's thrilled that you're doing this.
Oh, yes. Very.
I would
definitely.
think so.
Nice.
So what's your title then?
Yeah, I'm the Community Awareness Coordinator, really looking at
That's perfect.
How do we build grassroots support and awareness across the state.
You're the generation that's going to keep this going and offer all these tentacles going out and making all these connections like you're doing now.
Yeah, Jefferson Lines has actually been around in Minnesota since 1919.
That's amazing.
In 2019, we celebrated our 100-year anniversary of providing intercity bus service throughout the state and the Midwest. Right now, we serve in 14 states, from Wisconsin to Washington State and Minnesota down to Texas.
Really?
Yep, 170 communities, and we also connect to the national intercity bus network, kind of the same way on air travel that you'd go from American Lines to Delta. Passengers can transfer to Greyhound and any other provider, so they can really go just about anywhere in Canada, the U.S., and Mexico on the bus.
Because this is one of the things that why we've been chatting, and Nick isn't maybe aware of this because he's just in today with us, but we've been talking to other providers that are helping out in areas more rural that people aren't always getting the transportation they need, and we're trying to make these connections. Obviously, you guys are taking care of the lion's share here with bigger trips. A lot of what people need sometimes is just getting to a doctor's appointment or, that kind of thing. But this takes it to another level, Nick, because now we can get people, anybody, pretty much hey, I want to go see my uncle down in Texas. How am I going to get that done? And I don't want to fly. A place like Jefferson Lines can just make all the difference, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right.
They're comfortable, aren't they, these buses?
Yeah, these are comfortable buses with free Wi-Fi,
bathrooms,
Jeez. And all the rest.
So hub-wise, you have all these different locations, I'm assuming, throughout the country. What would be the closest main hub for our listening area, would you say?
We have stops along the 35 corridor between Minneapolis and Duluth, and we're really grateful to be in a position to be able to stop in these non-urbanized areas. And we're able to do that in large part because of the local support for having that service in the area. A lot of passengers will travel kind of to Duluth, where they can transfer on to another route that would take them headed west to Brainerd and Fargo and into the Dakotas. And then, of course, also the Twin Cities is a major hub for transit, going in just about every direction all throughout the state and the Midwest.
Okay, so Nick, I want to go, let's say I'm from Mora here. I decide I want to, I'll use Texas for an example. So how would I go about that?
So I guess, the first thing to do would be to go on to jeffersonlines.com, and we have a great booking tool there. We also have a phone service. You can do travel planning and bookings over the phone.
We'll give that number at the end.
We'll get that at the end.
Yeah.
We would kind of look at what's the closest stop for you from where you are, route you to your destination, and it may be interlining with another transit provider. And one of the reasons that I'm so glad to be part of this RTCC is that we're able to coordinate with the local providers like Arrowhead Transit and the others to really coordinate those first and last mile parts of the trip to get you from your home or whatever it is that you're leaving from to our bus stop.
And that was another thing, because I was on a webinar yesterday with a CAP agency on the western edge of Minnesota, and they have teamed up now with you too. And it's like, you are, I mean, you're going to be in demand because what you have available, you're a privately run organization, transit organization. You don't have the limitations that so many of the other transit services that we have. I know that you have your routes and you have specific routes. As you learn more about what's needed in our rural areas, you can adjust. It may take a year or two, but I mean, that is so refreshing that you don't have to go through so many ropes, red tape to do anything.
We do have a lot of flexibility to kind of go where the need is. Our corridor between the Twin Cities and Duluth, a large number of the passengers that use that are, of course, coming from Duluth to the Twin Cities and back and forth. But really, those stops along the way are so important to us. And so kind of getting passengers where they are is part of our vision.
The availability is a big part of it. And Nick, I know I hear of people a lot, they don't want to have to deal with having to drive from here, wherever here would be for you, for a listener, and try to get, let's say, to the airport. So do you guys pick up, do you do that part of it too?
Yeah, we do make stops at MSP. A lot of riders find that to be a really beneficial service. They don't want to park at the airport for several days or longer even. The bus is a great option.
Where do you make your stops where a person could leave their car and then take the bus down to, say, the airport? Or
Yeah, parking your car near our bus stops, I think it kind of depends stop by stop what makes sense just in that local context. I think a lot of the times people will be dropped off at the bus stop if it's kind of close by to where they're living.
That makes more sense,
Or, like I said, kind of using another transit provider if that's not an option.
Yeah, that makes sense, because I'm thinking of, for example, we've got a gal coming in from Colorado, and she's going to fly into MSP, and then she's bringing a bus service, and it might be you guys. I don't know exactly who she's tapped into, but they will drop her in Hinckley, and then her father's going to pick her up there, and he lives in Mora. It's great if you can park and ride type of thing, and that happens for some. But the biggest thing is if you can get from wherever you're at and be dropped, and then you guys pick up, you can take them the rest of the way.
Exactly.
That's one of the reasons Karen is chatting with me on a more regular basis, is to make sure that people who mobility might be more of an issue, they either don't have a car for whatever reason, or driving isn't an option for them. We want to make sure that they can come and go as they please as much as someone who can jump in a car and go.
Can you explain a little bit more about your routes, where you go? I mean, in our region or around Minnesota?
Yeah, I think on our relevant corridor here, leaving the Twin Cities, and I'll just say sometimes we leave every day at 6:55 a.m. from Minneapolis and get into Duluth at 10:30 in the morning, with stops in Blaine, Forest Lake, North Branch, Pine City, Hinckley, Sandstone, Moose Lake, and Cloquet. And then we have a route, of course, on the way back.
So you take back in the evening?
So the second trip that day would be leaving at 12:15 in the afternoon, getting back into Minneapolis at 3:30.
Nick, what's your system of payment?
Most people buy their tickets on our website through our booking system or on the phone. Our price structure is kind of based on mileage and the size of the trip. Usually within this corridor between Duluth and Minneapolis, trips would be $30 or under. And then, of course, more if they're going to Des Moines, Iowa, or to wherever it is that your trip is taking you.
Do you travel other than the 35 corridor? Do you do any kind of east-west routes?
We don't do that right now. I think that's where, the RTCC and working with the other providers really comes into the picture. And we're aware of some of the gaps in service that we have, and we're kind of looking at how can we be a partner in figuring out some solutions to get those communities more connected.
Do you have any accessibility for those who are handicapped on your buses?
Yeah, absolutely. All of our buses are completely accessible.
How do you feel about the train system, the light rail coming in? How do you feel that's going to affect your services coming in and out of Minneapolis?
I think it's all a question of scheduling and, what times of day work for people. My take on this is that, having another provider that runs along that route is not necessarily a bad thing and that we don't need to be in competition. It's just providing more options. And people, have their own individual needs. We'll just kind of make sure that we're covering what is not already covered in terms of scheduling and everything else.
I'm not too worried about Jefferson when I think about the fact that you've been around 100 years.
We have deep roots in the community and
Yep.
good relationships, and I think people also really, have a sentimental appreciation for bus travel. We've been, such a big part of really forging transportation systems throughout the state. I was just saying before this interview that our historic route, our first route that started in 1919 down to Kansas City, a part of that highway was called Jefferson Highway. And that's where we got our name. And we actually snowplowed part of that highway. And so we were really trying to figure out, how does transit work? Kind of been pioneers in transportation for a century. And travel planning and bookings can be made on jeffersonlines.com, or our phone number is 858-800-8898.
I just wanted to mention that we will be at the county fair. We are going to be in the commercial building, and I will have maps from Nick, and I will have other information, brochures from transit providers from our region. I'm there to answer any questions that you might have. Ashley Ekdahl, my cohort at the ECR TCC, will also be there part of the time. So we hope that you'll stop by and say hi and learn a little bit, and possibly sign up to become a volunteer driver, take a little survey so we can learn a little bit more about what your transportation needs are, make any comments.
Yeah.
Thank you, Nick, for being here, and thanks, Robin, for this interview as always, and I look forward to the next one. And then I also want to mention, if you want to check out the portal, which has the information about Jefferson Lines, it's eastcentraltransit.com. So that's where you'll find all kinds of information about all of the regional transportation that we have in our region.
Yeah, it's kind of one-stop shop is what we're looking for.
eastcentraltransit.com.
Perfect. All right, guys, I so appreciate it. This interview has been partially sponsored by MnDOT.